Good morning, everyone. My name is Anastasia Kibayo. I'm the chairperson for the Career Guardians in SPE Lagos. Today, we are having a virtual technical meeting with our special guest, Dr. Odutola, and she's going to be sharing us some insights and her achievements in sustainable and inclusive growth in the area of hydrate formation and in the development of Nigeria's first hydrate loop. That was done by engineer Dr. Toyin Odutola. My name, as I mentioned before, is Anastasia. I'm the chairperson of the Career Guardians in SPE Lagos, and I'm going to be your moderator for today. And I believe we're going to have a good time, especially with our special guests on this technical webinar. So this is just going to be the program of events. As we can see the breakdown, we just have 5 minutes per session. And engineer Dr. Toyin Odutola will have 45 minutes for her presentation, after which we'll have a chance to ask questions and, get some more insights into the development of the hydrate loop. Okay, so first and foremost, before we move on, I would just like us to just take a few moments to reflect on a safety moment. I know this is a period we're approaching the festive season, so it's quite pertinent for us to take into consideration security tips. So I'll just share a few and maybe 1 or 2 comments from the audience on security tips. So I just highlighted 5. So during this period, there's a lot of movement, there's a lot of shopping, traveling, visiting, in and out. So we should always close and lock our doors and windows, both during the day and night when we are not going in and out of our premises. We should be alert for unusual activities. I recall sometime yesterday, someone called me and they were like, oh, they're hearing some loud noise and it sounded like gunshots. So they were kind of apprehensive, only to immediately put out all the lights in the house and secured everybody, only to realize that there was a party going on nearby and they were just throwing up some firecrackers. So we should just be alert for any unusual activities, and we should be careful about admitting strangers. We might want to be helpful, we want to be kind, but we should be very careful so that our security comes first, especially when it comes to strangers. Do not leave valuable items near the windows, because especially when your windows are open or not tightly shut, because it makes it easy for people to really have access and maybe break in and steal. And then do not take calls in unsecured environments. I know sometimes it can be pressing for us to want to maybe make or receive calls urgently, but before we do that, we should actually have a scan of our environment and actually define whether it is a good time to take that call, so that we do not get harassed or intimidated to release our phones to strangers. So in all, we should be careful, we should be aware, and we should keep safe. So I'll just like from the audience, just 2 people, you can just make comments in line of these security tips for this safety moment. So any contribution from 2 persons from the audience, that would be very, very encouraging. Okay, so if no participants, okay, William Jikison raised his hand. You can go ahead and make your comment, Williams.
Okay, just in line with the security tip, I just wanted to remind us to what I'll capture is know before you go. Try and ask questions about where you are going. Perhaps you want to travel to Abuja, you want to travel to Kaduna, and you have people there. Just try and speak to people to know the spirit of the times in that location, so to say. And like somebody will say in Pidgin, he say, "I dey come, no be address." Try and also tell your close pals where you are going. because of the times that we are in. Thank you.
Thank you, Williams. That was very, very helpful. Very, very important. You know where you are going. Have information about your destination so that you are security conscious. Any other comments from participants? Just one more person. Okay, I don't see any hand raised, so we'll just move on to the next item on the agenda. I would like to call on our amiable section chairperson, Priscilla Nwere, to give us the opening remarks. Priscilla, you're next.
Thank you, Anastasia. Good morning, everybody. Good morning to our very special guest who's given so freely of her time to be here this morning. It's such a pleasure to have everyone on this call join us for this technical webinar. Today we have the honor of learning from the inventor of Nigeria's first hydrate loop. I have no doubt that it's going to be a 1 hour well spent. Please feel free, relax, engage with our speaker when she's done with her presentation, ask all the questions. I also encourage you to continue to follow SPE Lagos on all social media platforms to engage with us and to get first-hand information about all our programs. Thank you so much for joining. Enjoy the session. Thank you, Anastasia. Over to you.
Okay, thanks, Priscilla. Thanks, our amiable chairperson. Before the special guest comes on, I would just like to give a preamble of who we are expecting to speak with us on this technical webinar. Engineer Dr. Tony Odutola is a senior lecturer at the Department of Petroleum Engineering at the University of Port Harcourt. She had her first degree in chemical engineering from Ladoke Akintola University of Lagos in 2006, her MSc from the African University of Science and Technology, Nigeria, which was a scholarship funded by the World Bank and Nelson Mandela Institute in 2010. She was trained in hydrate mitigation at the Center of Hydrate Research in the Colorado School of Mines in the USA. And in 2017, she obtained a PhD in petroleum engineering from Uniport with a full scholarship from the PTDF, that is the Petroleum Technology Development Fund. Her research in hydrate formation produced the first indigenous multi-phase flow loop for hydrate research, which attracted funding from Total Energies under their education partnership with Uniport. Dr. Odutola has 2 patents on her flow assurance inventions, a published monograph, and several reference journals. She was a visiting scholar at MIT, that is the Massachusetts Institute of Technology in the USA, in 2020. And she's also a fellow of the MIT Empowering the Teachers program in the USA. She's registered with the Council for the Regulation of Engineering in Nigeria, that is COREN, and also the National Registry of Environmental Professionals. She's a corporate member of the Nigerian Society of Engineers and the Nigerian Society of Chemical Engineers. She's also a member of the Society of Petroleum Engineers and the Association of Professional Women Engineers in Nigeria, including the Organization for Women in Science in the Developing World. I would not speak any further. I can see that we're all eager to hear what Engineer Dr. Tony Odutola has to speak with us on this technical webinar. So I will now hand over the mic to Dr. Tony Odutola to give us her presentation on the hydrate loop research and invention. I will stop sharing to enable Dr. Odutola to share her screen and present on the hydrate loop invention. Dr. Odutola, please share your screen.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Anastasia. Thank you, Section Chair and SPE Lagos for having me. Let me share my slides now. Please, can you confirm that you can see the slides?
Yes.
I can see the slides. Please go ahead.
Okay. Good morning, everybody, once again. So I'm Tony Odutola, and I'll be talking about how I developed the first hydrate flow loop and things that, how the hydrate loop has contributed to sustainable and inclusive growth. And in this presentation, so, okay, I'm going to turn on my camera. Okay, so here's the outline of the presentation. I'll talk to you about what gas hydrates are during the introduction, and then I'll be telling you about different ways the way hydrate forms. So we'll be discussing hydrate formation, and we'll look at the problems caused by hydrates, why we have to think of ways of taking off hydrates from our lines. Then we'll discuss different hydrate management techniques. And then I'll be discussing chemical treatment with you because this is what I used. The loop I developed was for testing different chemicals for treating hydrates, for testing chemical inhibitors. So we will talk about the flow loop design and fabrication, how it was done. And eventually I'll be talking to you about the loop performance, where I'll share with you some of the results that we've obtained from this loop. And I'll conclude with some of the contributions this research has done in terms of sustainable and inclusive growth. So gas hydrates are non-stoichiometric crystalline compounds. What that means is that they do not have a particular stoichiometric equation. They contain about 85% of water, and they are a major flow assurance problem in offshore operations. Offshore operations, because that's where we usually have very low temperature, which is a requirement for hydrate formation, and high pressure because of the long lines that we have to pass our fluid through. And I should also mention here that this presentation will be interactive, so I'll be asking you to give me some feedback, to respond to some polls, which I'll be posting very soon. So back to what hydrates are. So hydrates form at high pressure, and we usually find high pressure environment and low temperature. So our offshore environments usually have very low temperature and high pressure because we have very long lines. So we have to, pass the fluid at high pressure so that it gets to the end of the line. Now, for hydrates to form, we need to have water and gas. And there are different types of hydrates, different structures of hydrates or different types of hydrates that are known. And these include the structure 1, structure 2, and structure H. But for us in the petroleum and gas industry, the structures that we are interested in are the structure 1 and structure 2 hydrates, because our fluid only forms structure 1 and structure 2 hydrates. So the structure 1 hydrates are usually formed by methane, ethane, hydrogen sulfide, carbon dioxide, which we usually find in our fluid, while the structure 2 hydrates are formed by isobutane and nitrogen. Now, to the first question, I would like you to respond to this because we call it gas hydrates. Does it mean that does it mean it only forms in gas-dominated lines, or we can have hydrates forming in oil lines, or we won't have hydrates forming in oil lines? So I would like you to respond to this poll before we move further. I think I shared the link with Anastasia. So if you want to post on the chat. Please, can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you though.
Okay, so I'm hoping that you can respond to this as well. Anastasia, please, can you post the link on the chat? I'm sharing, so that may be hard for me.
Yeah, I'm doing that.
Thank you. Okay, got it. Is it good to do that too? Okay. We've gotten some responses. So it's the misconception about gas hydrates. Okay. Okay, so thank you very much for participating in the poll. I see that a lot of us feel the misconception is that gas hydrates will form in gas-dominated line. I don't think that's a misconception. Gas hydrates will actually form in gas-dominated lines. Gas hydrates will not form in oil-dominated lines. That's a misconception because gas hydrates will form in oil-dominated lines, and gas hydrates will form in oil-dominated lines is also correct. So thank you for participating. I'm glad that it's getting interactive. So I'm going to show you how hydrates can form in different systems. So this is a research done by Sloan in Colorado School of Mines. And what they have here is a gas-dominated line. And it's important for us to understand the mechanism for hydrate formation so that when we start thinking of managing it, it's easier for us to manage it. So for gas-dominated lines, hydrate usually forms around the walls of the pipe, and you have something like an annular growth going on here. Eventually, the weight of the hydrate causes the hydrate to crumble. The hydrate crumbles when the weight builds, when the hydrate builds around the walls of the pipe, gets to the point that it gets so heavy and it crumbles, and then that is when you can start having a hydrate plug forming. So this is the conceptual model for hydrate formation in gas lines, gas-dominated lines. So you can still have some oil in these kind of lines. So, but you have more of gas. Now, for oil-dominated lines, you have oil and you have some water and you have gas. So you have hydrates forming around the walls of the hydrate forming around the molecule of water, like we can see over here. And the hydrate keeps growing. It keeps growing, increasing in size, and eventually it starts agglomerating, attaching itself to each other, and then you eventually have a plug. So understanding this helps us to know how we can manage hydrate formation. Now, for most of our fluids, what we want to do is to understand where hydrates will form and where hydrates will not form. So we usually try to get the hydrate formation curve, which can be gotten with a couple of correlations, or we use a software. So if your operation is occurring at the right-hand side of the curve, you will not bother about hydrate formation. Whereas if your operation is on the left-hand side of the curve, that's the hydrate risk zone. So you should be thinking of hydrate mitigation measures. So this is what I just what I explained here. So this is the hydrate safe region. If this is your pipeline, the temperature pressure profile of your pipeline, the left side of it, when your pipeline crosses this point, this critical point here, you're moving into the hydrate risk zone. So if your pipeline is operating all over here in the safe area, you do not need to treat for hydrates or control hydrates. But when you start moving into the hydrate risk zone, you might have to start thinking of ways to prevent hydrate formation or to manage hydrate formation from the methods we'll be looking at very shortly. Now, why do we even need to bother about hydrates? Because it causes a lot of problems. So here are some of the problems that hydrates cause. It causes the reduction in the internal diameter of the pipeline. So your pipeline was formerly maybe 8 inches, but with the hydrate formation forming around the walls of the pipe and building up, it keeps reducing, like we can see in this little picture over here. And eventually your pipeline internal diameter keeps reducing, could reduce up to 6, and if not managed, it keeps reducing. And eventually, if you do not manage it properly, you can have a plug, like the plug we have over here. And then when you eventually start having hydrate plugs, dissociating is another big problem, because hydrate is like pressurized gas. You have gas stored up in water. So when you do not depressurize properly, it can cause the pipe to rupture. So there have been situations where depressurization was taking place. They were depressurizing the hydrate, but it wasn't properly managed, and the hydrates, moved like a projectile and broke the pipe open and spilled the fluid out. So another thing one of the reasons why hydrate mitigation is important is because if it's not managed, there's production downtime. If you're having a problem, that's production that you cannot produce. So you have to start looking for ways to remediate the hydrates before you start producing. So I've already talked about operational and safety problems like what we have here. And loss of revenue is also one of the reasons why we should prevent hydrate formation. Okay, so because when we start having hydrate formation, we may start losing money if we do not treat quickly. So here are some of the methods that can be used in managing hydrates. There's the chemical control, which involves using a lot of chemicals. There's the chemical control, which involves using a lot of chemicals like the THIs, the thermodynamic hydrate inhibitors, or the low dosage hydrate inhibitors, which I'll be talking about shortly. Then there's also the removal of gas hydrate formers, where you separate the hydrate formers so that they do not form anymore. You take the hydrate former away from the fluid. So in that case, you would want to take off the gas or try to dehydrate to remove the water. So when you do not have gas and water together in the fluid, the possibility of forming hydrates is reduced. Pressure control. So we know that hydrate forms at elevated pressure, but that's subject to the temperature at which the operation is occurring. So if you try to take the pressure low, if you try to reduce the pressure below the hydrate formation pressure, then you would likely not have hydrates forming anymore. And the mechanical method, which involves using pigs to clean the pipe periodically. So if you know you're having hydrates forming around the walls of the pipe, you might want to pig the line periodically to clean the line and take off the hydrates. So that's a method that can be used. And then there's also thermal insulation, where you try to insulate the pipe, or you use heat treatment. You can treat the pipe using different methods of heating the pipe. So these are some of the methods that have been used to control hydrates. So in my second poll, I'm asking, which of these do you think is the best method for managing hydrates? I think it's the same link. So please confirm that you can see this question. You can respond to this question when you click the link. Okay. Okay, thank you for your response. I see a lot of people saying chemical method is the best, and some are saying the removal of hydrate formers is the best. So, well, so I'm seeing two people. I mean, there's 33% of us saying that removal of hydrates formers is the best, and the 33% saying chemical method is the best. So I don't think there's any best or method for hydrate formation. It depends on the facility you're dealing with. if you know you can actually control the pressure, you may want to try that out. But it also depends on the cost. You might want to see if this is expensive, or whether you can actually afford to do this. Because for chemical method, you have to keep injecting the chemicals every day to prevent the hydrate formation. So you want to check if that is something you want to do. So eventually, the best method is a combination of them. So you may want to try combining one or two methods to see how it performs and how it prevents hydrates from forming, depending on what your production facility is like. So we'll move on to our next slide. Okay, so for me, when I was working on the hydrate loop, what I had in mind was the chemical treatment, which is actually chemical treatment I think is very popular. That's what people do. It's kind of easier. All you do is inject the chemical to the line, and then it either melts the hydrate or prevents the hydrate from agglomerating or prevents the growth of the hydrates. So there are different types of chemicals that we use in treating hydrates. These include the thermodynamic hydrate inhibitors and the low dosage hydrate inhibitors, which there's a lot of research going on about. These are the kinetic hydrate inhibitors, which are usually polymers, and then the anti-agglomerants, which are surfactants. Okay, so for thermodynamic hydrate inhibitors, they are well used in the industry already. They are methanol, monoethylene glycol. Those are the chemicals that are used in melting hydrates or preventing hydrate formation. So what it does is that it reduces the temperature depression, and eventually, if you could not produce at this point, because if you could, I mean, here was the hydrate risk zone in the past, but it kind of gives you're able to have your operation in the hydrate risk zone without having risk of hydrates, because it kind of shifts the hydrate equilibrium curve towards the left. That's for the thermodynamic hydrate inhibitors. But now they are required in very large quantity. So, and again, when you put these thermodynamic hydrate inhibitors, especially in your oil line, some of it is retained by the hydrocarbon phase, by the oil phase. So when you take your crude oil for refining in the refinery, you can still have some residual methanol, which can cause problems with the catalyst. It can cause problems with the catalyst during refining. So a lot of research has moved, from thermodynamic hydrate inhibitors to low dosage hydrate inhibitors. And again, for thermodynamic hydrate inhibitors, because they are required in large quantity, you would also need very large storage vessels for them. So for low dosage hydrate inhibitors, there are basically two types. There's the anti-agglomerants, which prevents the agglomerating. Remember, we looked at the mechanism of hydrate formation, and we said for oil pipelines, what happens is that the hydrate forms, then it agglomerates. So the anti-agglomerants prevent the agglomeration of the hydrates, but it allows hydrate form. Then for the kinetic hydrate inhibitors, it prevents the growth of hydrate formation. So it kind of delays the growth. And eventually, there's an induction time where the hydrate does not, it reduces the induction time. So you do not have your hydrates growing to a particular size. It reduces the time at which the hydrate starts crystallizing and then growing before the plug formation occurs. So now back to why we are here, how the hydrate loop was designed and fabricated. I just wanted us to have a basic knowledge of what hydrate is and how hydrate is being controlled, so that when we look at the hydrate loop design, we would understand the different concepts that I had to think of and put in the design and fabrication. So here's the process flow diagram for the hydrate flow loop. Now, what I was trying to do was to mimic a flow assurance, an offshore environment. So here, the thick line here is what the flow line is. This is the flow line, and the this thin line here is the PVC pipe. And the annulus between the thick line and the thin line here is where we pump in cold water. So what I was trying to mimic is what happens offshore, where you have your flow lines lying on the waterbed. So we have our flow line here enclosed in a waterbed, and we generate cold water from the cooling unit and circulate around the loop throughout the experiment. So we have our gas hydrate former here, which is methane gas, which we pump into the equipment, and we have our water vessel or inhibitor vessel here, which we also pump into the equipment. So we have a lot of pressure gauges and temperature gauges, which we use in measuring or checking how the process is going. Now, hydrate formation is an exothermic reaction. So when hydrate starts forming, we usually notice that the temperature of the loop suddenly increases. And then we also have our differential pressure meters, which we were using to check the differential pressure between the inlet and outlet of the coldest part of the loop. So this is how I'll just take you through some pictures of how the loop was during while it was being fabricated and how it looks now. So here we had the loop, it was already skid mounted. Our stainless steel pipe is inside this PVC pipe here, and we have some temperature gauges there. So initially we thought we could use this cooler as our cooling unit, but it wasn't working. We were not achieving the temperature we desired. So here, I think we're doing some electrical installation of the control panel and some other electrical components so that we could control this from a central point. And over here, we had removed our cooler and we brought in a refrigerating unit. And here, that all those were happening in the fabrication, the place where it was fabricated. Over here, we had brought it over to Uniports, and we had to still try to install. And this is what it looks like right now. And this is the back view of the equipment. So I have an animation here that shows how the loop operates. So I'm just going to play this video.
The peculiar nature of the offshore environment has necessitated the need for the oil and gas industry to develop durable subsea technologies and better hydrate inhibitors to prevent hydrate formation and ashore flow. With the introduction of the mini hydrate flow loop, these problems can be tackled by studying hydrate formation in gas-dominated systems using a constant volume batch experiment. The laboratory loop is a closed loop of 12 meters, fabricated using 0.5-inch 316 stainless steel pipe enclosed in an insulated 4-inch polyvinyl chloride (PVC) pipe. The hydrate loop mimics offshore production in the subsea environment. The steel pipe enclosed in the PVC pipe containing cold water represents the flow line on the seabed, surrounded by cold water. The skid-mounted loop was fitted with pumps, temperature gauges, pressure gauges, differential pressure transmitters, a gas mixing vessel, an inhibitor mixing vessel, and a natural gas cylinder. The experiment starts by pumping 435 milliliters water into the steel pipe to raise the loop pressure to about 25 psi using pump 3. The cooling water generated from the refrigerator is then pumped around the annulus of the steel pipe and the PVC pipe using pump 2 to progressively reduce the loop temperature to hydrate formation temperature. Natural gas is injected into the loop to achieve a pressure of 150 psi as a single batch. The screw pump is turned on to cause agitation in the flow line. The temperature and pressure around the loop are recorded every minute during the 2 hours experiment. Hydrate formation is indicated by 1. Reduction in flow viewed from the transparent flowmeter. 2. Rapid rise in temperature caused by the exothermic reaction of hydrate formation. 3. Rapid decrease in the final loop pressure, caused by the natural gas being used up to form hydrates. 4. An increase in the differential pressure between the inlet and outlet of the refrigerating unit due to hydrate crystals forming around the inner pipe walls. When testing hydrate inhibitors, the inhibitor is mixed with water and pumped into the loop to make up the 435 milliliters. The gas is injected to increase the loop pressure to 150 psi, and the cooling water is circulated around the loop. Inhibitor effectiveness is indicated by 1. No reduction in flow viewed from the glass flow meter. 2. No spontaneous rise in loop temperature due to the absence of the hydrate formation exothermic reaction. 3. No significant drop in the final loop pressure because the inhibitor prevented the hydrate formation reaction between the gas and water. 4. No significant change in the differential pressure between the inlet and outlet of the refrigerating because the inhibitor effectively prevented hydrate formation in the pipe walls. The mini hydrate loop can adequately predict hydrate formation in gas pipelines and can be used in screening and selecting kinetic hydrate inhibitors.
Okay.
The peculiar
Okay, so the animation just showed how the hydrate equipment works, how we got it to work, and I'll be sharing with you some of the results, interesting results that we've gotten from our experiments in this using the hydrate loop. So here, what we plotted is the differential pressure against the temperature, differential pressure against time and temperature against time. Now, remember, I said that hydrate formation is an exothermic reaction. In this particular experiment, we were not checking for, we were not testing any inhibitor. We just wanted to know if hydrate formed or not. So we had our gas and water, as I already explained, and we passed it into the equipment and we monitored for 2 hours. Eventually, we saw that around the 110 minutes, there was a rise in temperature. Okay, rise in temperature here. And that coincides with the rise in differential pressure we also saw. And we could also see that the temperature was rising gradually until we saw this spike in differential pressure, which also corresponded to a rise in the temperature. Now we have this little test point very close to the refrigerator. So most times we depressurize from there. And when we depressurized, we had this very milky substance coming out, which shows that they gave us evidence of hydrate formation. And in less than a minute, we could, after depressurizing, the fluid had stabilized and the gas had evolved and we're having water left. So this made us understand that hydrate was forming. So we actually repeated this experiment with water alone and we didn't have anything looking like this. So that showed that what was forming was actually hydrates. And then we decided to try a couple of, I tried a couple of inhibitors, and some of the inhibitors I used are 2-dimethylamino ethyl methacrylate and polyvinyl pyrrolidone and N-vinyl caprolactam. Now, I should say that these inhibitors are all kinetic hydrate inhibitors. From what we looked at in the mechanism of hydrate formation, only kinetic hydrate inhibitors will work, or thermodynamic hydrate inhibitors will work in gas-dominated systems. And what I've been working on so far has been gas-dominated system, although the loop can also test for hydrates in oil-dominated systems. So we tried the inhibitors, and at the beginning of the experiment, the pressure was about 150 psi. But at the end of the experiment, the pressure had reduced. When there was no inhibitor, it had reduced to about 70 psi. And that means that because we were running a batch process where we load our reactants and we shut in the line, and then we allow the reaction to occur for 2 hours. So that meant that the reaction had occurred and gas was used up in forming hydrates. So this also made us understand that this particular inhibitor, 2-dimethyl ethyl methacrylate, was not very efficient at mitigating hydrate formation in the loop. So we also tried 2 other inhibitors, and these inhibitors, the pressure reduction was from 150 psi to about 110 psi. So although there was hydrate formation, it still was able to prevent the, it was able to stop hydrate formation or prevent rapid hydrate formation. Remember, when you're using a kinetic hydrate inhibitor, hydrate actually forms, but the growth is limited, the growth is reduced, so it doesn't grow as much as it would have grown when there was no hydrate inhibitor. Now, these are some of the things that we have achieved from this particular research. So I've been able to design and fabricate a hydrate equipment, which in the past nobody thought could happen. Actually, the way it started was we were supposed to buy an equipment from abroad, and I was one responding to most of the emails. The equipment had a lot of limitations, and my professor would write to them and tell them, oh, can you change this? Can you change that? And eventually they got angry and they said, look, this equipment was designed by a PhD student, so stop bothering us. So at that point in time, my supervisor, Professor Yukon, he said, you're going to design yours yourself. I'm not buying, we are not getting it again. So just go and think, if a PhD can do it abroad, you can also do it. So that was what eventually happened. I had to start thinking of how to get it done and study, and change a lot of things, because I've been talking about batch experiment here. The equipment was initially designed to be a continuous flow experiment, but because of the electricity issues we have in Nigeria, it was very difficult to run it as a continuous flow process. So I have to think of other ways of making it work. And eventually the batch process started working. So the equipment has been used as a training facility in my university, and it has also served several other universities in the nation and in neighboring African countries as well. So we've had over, I think, about 4 PhDs now after my graduation have used this equipment, and they have also gotten PhDs. Several MSc students from Uniport and other universities have come. Someone came in from UI to use the equipment, and the equipment is being used to demonstrate hydrate formation even to students. So, which is a very good one, because I mean, when I was in school, I didn't get to see things like this, but most of the students I even have on it, like when we started, they were undergraduates, and some of them are even on their PhD now and still using the equipment. Locally developed inhibitors are being done in the university now. A lot of people are looking at different kind of polymers from plants, and they are testing it using this equipment because the equipment is available for the test. And then several patents have been gotten. A monograph has been published, of course, several journals. And now there's the awareness that things like this can be done locally. And people are now thinking of ways of fabricating different tools. I'm working on something different now for wax inhibition. So different things are coming up. People are fabricating different experimental setups to test different things. So, and this has been a good addition to knowledge as well. Now, we had, for environmental protection, this research has helped to protect the environment, because we know that when I was explaining the dangers of hydrate formation, I showed a particular slide where there was an elbow joint that was that exploded or ruptured due to poor dissociation of hydrates. So when the hydrate dissociation was not properly monitored, a rupture occurred, and the pipe ruptured and spilled out the content of the pipe to the environment. So if from this research, because there will be better hydrate inhibitors being developed, and you can actually test your hydrate inhibitors, it's easier for you to have a proper line without any spillage, without any oil spillage due to pipe rupture. Now, we've been talking about low carbon emission fuels of recent. People are looking at transiting from fossil fuel to low carbon emission fuels, and this research comes in handy because there are a lot of gas projects coming up, because people are looking at how they can transition to using gas as instead of crude oil. So a lot of gas projects are coming up, and we want to keep our lines clean and open so that we are not having plugs that will prevent the that will prevent the gas from getting to the end user. So this research comes in handy because it can help to make the operators know how to keep the lines open such that we can always assure the flow of our gas from wherever we are moving it to. And we know that recently people have been talking about associated oil, not associated gas. So there's a lot of gas development projects going on, and this research will come in handy to help with some of the requirements that will be needed in those gas projects. I think this is the end of my presentation. I had some citations. I cited some particular papers, so here's the reference for those papers. So thank you very much. I would also want to say here that I have a published monograph, and it's on hydro prediction and management in offshore environments. If you need a copy, you can reach me using this number or this email address, and I would love your feedback as well. So please use this link to leave a feedback for me. Thank you. I should stop sharing now, right? Anastasia, I'm done.
Okay. Thank you, Doctor. Please don't leave yet. Thank you for the presentation. In your presentation, very excellent presentation. Yes, there are a lot of comments in the chat box. An excellent presentation. You started off by telling us how hydrates are formed. You even challenged us to know which environment it could occur, but obviously it could occur both in oil and gas production. And you also took us into the research where you mentioned that you simulated an offshore environment using local materials, but it actually provided that basis for the research into how hydrates are formed, the temperatures that are formed, the differential pressures that have an impact on it, and also flow assurance, where you compare the continuous flow versus the batch process, where you had to stick to the batch process due to the inconsistent power supply. And also you even went further to take it to how this relates to the need for low carbon emissions, where there's a high focus now, or a trending towards gas compared to crude oil, just to reduce the carbon emissions, and how the hydrate loop that you invented provides a basis for us to do some research and provide technologies to combat hydrate formation. Thank you, Doctor. Now I'll go to our participants. I'm sure you have your questions noted down. So this is an open session for questions that you would like Dr. Odutola to answer based on the presentation. So please, audience, let's have your questions. So are we saying that we have a very good understanding? Are there no questions for Doctor?
I think there's a question in the chat box.
Okay. Okay, there's a question in the chat box. Okay. Okay, it says, have you or anyone tested gas condensates or live oils in the flow loop? It would be nice to investigate multi-flow effects as well.
Okay, so no, for now we haven't tested gas condensates or live oil. What we've been testing are we've been looking at just gases, and the reason is because of the pressure. Because if we are having oil, we would need to increase the pressure to have hydrate form, and right now when we started, we didn't want to have any serious issues, so we're working with what we felt was very safe. So, but like I said in the my slide, we are trying to upgrade. So there's plan to upgrade the loop to handle higher pressures, and then we will start testing for condensates and live oil.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. There's also another question that says, thanks for an excellent presentation and providing a resource base for research. Did you consider experimenting with a wet gas, methane with little water, using the hydrate loop in addition to the external cold water in the annulus?
Okay, so the cold water in the annulus was not mixing with the gas and water we injected into the loop, right? I'm just trying to, I don't know. Okay, so what we did was we had some water in the loop, and then we injected some gas into the loop. So we had gas and water in the loop, and then we passed cold water around the steel pipeline, the annulus, around the steel pipeline. We used that to cool down the temperature of the gas and water in the steel pipe to hydrate formation conditions. So wet gas, you said methane with little water. That's basically what we had. Well, what we're using was compressed natural gas because we needed the pressure coming from the compressed natural gas to boost the pressure of the loop to hydrate formation conditions. So I don't know if I have answered your question, but if you're not clear, you can ask again, because I'm trying to also understand the question properly.
Okay, so let's see. The question came from Okwoma Najiofo. Does the response given answer to your question? Answer your question? Or does she need to give some more insight into it? You can just drop it in the chat box. So she says yes, that it gave the response that she wanted. Okay, my question, I have a question for you, Doctor. You mentioned the temperature ranges and you said it was to simulate offshore environments. And the temperature ranges, was it just specific to Nigeria or did you compare it to other regions? And do you believe that it will give similar results considering that temperature range and also the temperature range translating to the differential pressure that you anticipate for the experiment outcome?
Okay, so what we're considering was the sea temperature of about 4 degrees Celsius. So we were trying to reduce the cooling water at every point in time. We try to leave the cooling water at 4 degrees Celsius, which is normally the sea temperature. Other parts of the world, we're not looking at very cold climate. So we're looking at around this temperate region where the sea temperature is around 4 degrees Celsius. So that was what we're looking at. And your second question was about differential pressure. And also the differential pressure we were looking at was actually the differential pressure of the inlet. Okay, so there was a refrigerating unit and the pipe passes through the refrigerating unit. Now because that's the coldest spot in the loop, we believe that hydrates will start forming there. So we're looking at the differential pressure, the difference in pressure between the inlet of that place of the pipe entering the difference in pressure between the pipe entering the refrigerating unit and the pipe leaving it. Okay, so it's same pipe, but the pressure in the inlet and outlet. Because when there's a huge difference in pressure, that means we are seeing some hydrates has already started forming around the walls of the pipe, causing the difference in pressure. So for pressures, what we were doing, okay, if you're looking at the hydrate formation pressure, hydrate formation pressure differs with the composition of the fluid and the temperature of the fluid. So that's why we also, because we didn't want to work at very high pressures, we were trying to bring the temperature as low as possible so that we'll be having moderately low pressures forming hydrates. We'll be forming hydrates at moderately low pressures. So that was what we did.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you. That's a good response. Thank you. Are there any other questions for Doctor? Okay, there's one that just came. Thank you, Doctor, and good morning. Please, did you consider how flow regime affects hydrate formation? If you didn't, do you see it as a potential research area?
Yes, so I did consider flow regime. There was a time we checked, we changed because the screw pump has different speeds. So we reduced the speed. We were trying to take it to laminar flow, and then we took it down, we took it to turbulent flow where we increased it to make sure that the agitation was rapid. And yes, we saw some difference. But it was just one experiment I conducted with that. So it's not conclusive. I can't say that this is how it is until we do a repetition. Maybe we've done the experiment like 3 or 4 times and we are certain that this is the trend, then we can now report that, okay, this is how it happens. But of course, with the turbulent flow, we rarely saw any serious agglomeration. There was no, the hydrate formation did not, the hydrates did not agglomerate. And my own thought is because there was rapid turbulence, perhaps they were forming and the turbulence was breaking them apart. So that's my thought. But when we conduct the experiment again and study a little more, we'll be able to say with certainty what happened.
Thank you, Doctor. And I believe that the research it doesn't stop here, and there will be a lot of additions and also a good chance for all these aspects to be addressed. Thank you so much, Doctor. And it's really commendable in the area of sustainable growth, sustainable and inclusive growth, to have an invention by a Nigerian in Nigeria, considering a challenge that we experience in the oil and gas industry, especially during production. So next, thank you once again, Doctor. Next, I will call on Odion Okosun to give us vote of thanks.
I think there are some more questions here.
Oh, some more questions have come up. Okay. All right. In which other area do you think your research is limited to? That is from Idika Trust God.
Is limited to.
In which other area?
I don't understand the question, but in which other area do you think your research is limited to? I don't understand.
Maybe if we turn it around and say how can you expand more on the research? Maybe we'll turn it around like that. How can we extend the research? What you have done is very commendable, but I believe that this question may be speaking to how further can we go, or can you go in the research and invention?
Okay, so I've talked about the use of what we are doing now is testing different inhibitors. I've also talked about trying to upgrade the loop to make it so that we can test oil systems in it. And because we are looking at low carbon emission fuels and all of that, I'm also considering other aspects of hydrate research, which like trying to use hydrates to store gases, because since we are already thinking of ways of since we are shifting from fossil fuel, we are shifting from crude oil. So I'm thinking of also using hydrates as a means of gas storage. Yeah, so those are the other ways I've been thinking of extending this research.
Okay, thank you, Doctor. Idika, does that respond to your question? Does that response provide an answer to your question?
Okay, I think there's a question from Basi. During your experiment, did you experience cases where ice rather than hydrates formed in the loop? If yes, did this affect your results or offer new insights? So the hydrate formation temperature is usually higher than ice formation temperature. For ice to form, you have to get to 0 degrees Celsius. So we did not get to that temperature. So we did not form ice at any point. What we're forming was hydrates. I think that's all.
Okay. Okay, Basi, is it the same, similar ice rather than hydrates? Yeah, that's Basi. Okay, there's also a question about this sharing of the slides. I believe the slides will be shared, the recording will be shared, the presentation recording will be shared so that people can have a chance to listen in again. Okay, I don't see further questions. I don't see further questions, but once again, on behalf of the Society of Petroleum Engineers Lagos, this technical webinar with our guest speaker was very insightful, and the invention and research outcomes were very commendable. And I really appreciate the fact that she's not stopping there. She's taking it further and expanding to address issues, especially with the hydrate formation, and also delve into opportunities where we in the area of low carbon emissions and how hydrate formation, how this hydrate loop can be used to tackle the hydrate formation where there's, especially where there's gas production. So I would like to thank you, Engineer Dr. Odutola, for coming on the webinar. Thank you for sharing the research outcomes and also giving us a good insight into not just hydrate formation, but how you actually provided a roadmap for dealing with the issues and also providing opportunities for dealing with to recommend inhibitors also for the hydrate formation treatment and management. So thank you once again, and we look forward to the next time we have you on, and I'm sure by then you would have provided this research update and the invention would have expanded beyond this scope. But I know that, like you rightly said, other PhD students are currently using the loop both in Nigeria and in Africa to attend to hydrate issues in their regions. And I believe this is a good one for us, and it's also a good one for you. And once again, thank you, and we hope to see you some other time. Thank you. Priscilla, do you have any comment, any closing remarks in addition to the vote of thanks that I've just given?
I think you've done well. Dr. Odutola, if you don't mind, Anastasia will quickly go through the upcoming events, and then we'll all take a virtual picture before you leave us so we can appropriately capture everybody who's attended. Okay. So just give us a few more minutes, we'll be done. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Priscilla. So we have some upcoming events in SPE Lagos from 27th to the 28th of October and also the 29th of October via Zoom. We have Python for the fundamentals. This is going to be by the YP, as the young professionals for the Lagos section. And what they expect to give us on Python is an introduction to Python, Python building blocks, and also an interactive project on Python, which will firm up the Python fundamentals. Python is under the information technology, and as we can see, we're in a digital age. So Python fundamentals is a very good background to have for this era. In addition, we have from Covenant University, the YP, that's Young Professionals, in conjunction with the Covenant University, practical application of Excel for students and early career professionals. This is going to be on the 28th of October. It's also going to be virtual via Zoom. And then we will have Engineer Chukwu Emeka, who is the chairperson, taking us through that session in conjunction with the SPE Covenant University. So those are two upcoming events, 27, 28, and 29. So we also have the breast cancer. This is a breast cancer month. It's also coming up on the Career Guardians platform. Looking at breast cancer in Nigeria, as well with women, factors, screening, early detection, and current treatment guidelines. This is going to be on Saturday. It's going to be via Zoom. And then we also have the Student Liaison Workshop Series in collaboration with YP. And they're giving us an advanced Microsoft Excel training. This is going to be via Zoom. It's between 10 to 5 p.m. on the 29th of October. And we also, okay, it's a hybrid. So you could actually be at the venue or you could dial in online. So we have the certified Microsoft Excel expert, Victor Momo, who's going to take us through that session. This is SPE Lagos section 61. You can reach us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and we also have our YouTube presence. Just for inquiries, there's Odion Okosin, there's LC, and Adewale, and then for any information on SPE membership benefits, you can go to spe.org, that is the website, and you can get several information that you require. So those are the contact numbers and email addresses for our membership renewal and registration with SPE. So now I would like to ask everyone to turn on their cameras for the photo session so that we can all take our photo session for the webinar. So can you kindly put on your cameras, everyone? All right. So please put on your cameras, everyone. So that we can have a photo session. Thank you.
Can you just take down the slides?
Sorry? Odion, are you able to capture everyone?
Yes, I'm on it, and I'm doing justice to that. Okay.
Great.
Can we all smile, please? And okay, we'll do more. We'll do more. Kindly smile. SPE, oil and gas, right?
Gas.
Okay, so let's just do a thumbs up now with a smile. SPE, oil and gas. Okay, okay. I will go to the next page. I'm not sure those in the other page have turned on their camera. Well, I think we're good. We're good for now. Okay, let's do it one more time. Let's do it one more time. Thank you. SPE, thumbs up. Face to your camera and all smiles. Thank you. Okay. 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 Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Thanks, everyone.
All right.
So
thank you.
The end of the session.
Good morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well done, Toyin. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Adi.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Toyin.
Thank you. Who is speaking?
All right, the link goes down in 3, 2, 1, 0. All right, thank you, everyone. See you next time.
All right, bye.